Good evening, everybody. Last stream of the year. Imagine that. Gonna do a multitude of different things tonight. Mainly, it's gonna be spindle type work. Period. Gotta get ready for one. Next weekend here in Pennsylvania, they have they call a farm show, and our club is doing demonstrations, which I signed up to do on Saturday of next week. So a lot of what I did in the past was, stick with smaller stuff that's easy to make, quick to make. Generally, it's a lot of kids. So one of the things is to make tops. I figured I'd practice making a couple tops first. And then I got lanterns to work on. Tops generally are going to be made out of hardwoods. This piece of hard maple. I'll just take it to a cylinder and we'll put a tenon on one end. And then we can grab it in the chuck. Pretty basic stuff. I'm not quite totally round there yet, but that's okay. I'm more interested on, I don't know if it was last year, maybe. Was it Target or one of those? I think it was Target. And they had like Crayola markers for kids, of course. And I guess it was like the end of their season or whatever for that stuff. So they had them for like $1 a pack or something like that. So I know I got at least 1 or 2 packs of them just to do the tops and things like that, because that's what I use to give them some character. We'll do some texturing and add on them as well, but so it'll mainly be, a lot of this will be skew work, which is what I like to use because you can do it. They can get a really super smooth finish with very little effort. So we'll start by making sure that it is round, because it wouldn't make much sense for a top not to be round on the edges. So it's nice and smooth and clean. And reduce the diameter right down here. Yeah, that's what I want to do. It's been a long time since I made top. Probably more than enough for a handle. Remember, we're working with hard maple. And a skew does not make a big, will not take a big cut at one time. So by the looks of it, looks like my skew needs sharpened. This is one, I mean, the skew can be ground, and I probably will grind this one. Probably not tonight, but probably before I go next weekend I will. And then from there I hone it a little bit. And when I hone it, the camera really probably won't really pick it up very well. It'll give me just a small little bevel, sharp bevel there and there. And the skew needs to be very sharp to use it and do it, to work with it very well. At least that's my opinion. Most people's opinion is that the skew has to be sharp. All your tools should be sharp, but a skew has to be very sharp. So we'll take this diameter down. Because we need to, there's a point in there, because that live center still has the point. And that's what a skew is famous for right there. Dig the point right in. Like I say, it's hard maple, but does cut. It will cut cleanly, but it's also harder to cut. We need a nice clean surface. I probably should have gave myself a little bit more room here, because I don't want to get rid of the tailstock where I'll get vibration with it being that far away from the chuck. One of the good parts about using a skew for something like this is I can get a perfectly clean cut that I don't need to sand. That's one of the things that we're not allowed to do, because it is inside in a venue. I'm not supposed to be sanding. So this way I don't need to worry about the sanding part. And it makes it much quicker. So that's kind of like that. So it would have made more sense to rearrange things here a little bit. because the rest of this will be on the end view. So if we go to there, I should be able to bring that view in bring it in nice and tight. Other way. Okay. So let's try that. The other kind of fun thing to do with these is we can do plenty of different like textures on the end here. So we'll use some texturing tools on there. And we'll do it with the finer one. I have several different texturing tools. These are the spiraling texturing tools. As I just knocked the camera every which way but loose. My apologies. There we go. So I think we'll start with the smaller one. This is the Sorby mini texturing tool. The tool rest has to be back fairly far away because of the wheel. And of course we want to be able to keep our fingers away from it. And the speed is going to be really slow. Around about 500 or less. And then we'll come in almost like on its little bevel. Just rotate a little bit. And that should give us the little spiral lines, which it did. And then from there we can go, you can flip it over and give it a little, whoops, don't get your fingers on it now. Because we sort of want to like outline each feature. And that gave us some little bumpity dumps there. So then we can come back, we can rotate it over a little bit more of an angle. It'll give us a different sort of texture pattern. And we can go out to the end. It'll give us a bigger texture pattern. Okay. I've been watching a bunch of videos when I've had them for a long time, and I never really got the hang of necessarily getting a good spiral pattern out of them. But after watching some of the videos, I sort of figured out what I was doing wrong with them. So now we can add some color to it. Multitude of colors. Of course, they need to be bright. Let's try the blue and the orange. Once again, you need to keep the speed down on all this stuff. Bring my tool rest back over. It gives me a place to put my hand. So then if we color across that, then it'll leave the white underneath it, which is sort of what you want. It's your black. And sort of trying people that I've watched do tops, and I've done enough of them, like I say, at this farm show. We'll give it a contrast between the two, which there is going to be a black line there. And then we can go out here and do a blue. For the rest of the way out. I do have some other markers of this, but I just kind of find it fascinating that, you know, for $1 I can play around with all these markers, because the other markers I have, which are around here somewhere, they're actually very good markers. They're the Tombow markers, so they're rather expensive to be sort of messing around making tops. So that gives us a pretty interesting kind of a pattern. And I put the pattern and the color on the top. I've seen a lot of other people do tops where they made them and did the bottoms of them, which to me really doesn't make sense to do it that way. Because when the top's spinning, then you can't see anything. What was I looking for? Voyage. Because now we got to get rid of some material on the back side. And you basically can do a top with any multitude of tools. As you can see, this standard 1/2-inch bowl gouge. We need to round this over a little bit. We don't want sharp edges. And getting rid of the material, we're also going right back into basically making another top. And there'll be very little waste involved. And I'm going to sand this edge a little bit. Didn't necessarily get that quite as round as what I would like. So just touch it with a little bit of sandpaper. And go back to my spindle gouge up here rather than the skew. Just by virtue of I mean, I don't have a ton of time into this thing, but also want it to be nice. Get rid of the live center support. So that I can cut that off up there. The handle actually looks like it's a little bit big, but I probably, no, I can feel a vibration right there just by itself, so I can't go back up and cut that. So now it's a matter of cutting this off, basically. But I want it to be a cleanly cut the whole way down. And slow the speed down. You see it starting to wobble a little bit. I'm just basically wiggling the spindle gouge up and down. And if we need to, we can take a little bit of fine sandpaper and sort of round that over a little bit and make it, because it doesn't really want to be a total sharp point for it to spin quite well. Now if I only had something flat to spin it on. Here's a box. And let's go back overhead. Because I do actually have more important things to do than play around making tops. That's something I can work on this week a little bit and make some. So as you can see, then the colors and the textures kind of spiral as it goes by. Like I say, that handle's a little bit hefty. But, you know, there again, it's, what do we spend? There's my timer. You know, like a 5-minute project or whatever. And all done with basically like 2 tools or 3 tools or what have you. So, like I say, we did, and I know when I was there like 2 years ago, we did a boatload of them. What really will get the people and the kids' attention, I mean, the texturing tools there don't make any noise. But I do have one of the chatter tools. You know what, let's do one more. See if I remember how to use my chatter tool. So now that we're back into a shorter, sort of a shorter piece, should not need the tailstock support. And we can go back to our end view as well. And the rest is too high for the mobile gouge. Because we certainly can get just as clean of a cut using the bowl gouge or the spindle gouge as what you can the skew. Because the skew takes a lot of practice. I'm using this, basically using the wing of the spindle gouge, which actually operates just like a skew. As you can see, we'll go a nice little handle on this one. Then we'll come from the top down with our spindle gouge. So we get nice and clean into that corner. Make a tiny little V cut into that corner. And it's going to make it a little bit like dainty, kind of maybe. And then we'll slow our speed way down. Again. Less than 500 for these texturing tools. Because these texturing tools here, it's just basically a brass rod that goes through them, so there is no bearing in there. So these need to be run at a very slow speed. Otherwise, you'll ruin them. The tool rest has got to be back far enough to keep the wheel. So if we get in there as close as we can, we're going to go quite as far out. And only go one direction. Make sure we got a little carried away there because I sort of, that's kind of the other key to them, is to go really in one set sort of pace and one sort of angle over, because I didn't get as nice of a, nowhere near as nice of a pattern there on that one than I did on the other one. We can also use our point tool. Handles up here. And we can highlight that with just a simple little V groove to make it a difference. And we can make a little V that's nice and simple. That one's not going to be as nice as the other one. It's almost tempting to cut that off and start over. And I think I will, because the spiral just isn't what it should be. And of course, sort of the problem with doing what I'm doing there is I just made that diameter in there even smaller than what it was. So let's try that again. And my tool rests head on the high side. You want to be cutting around right around the center point. And I'm just sort of rotating in on that bevel. And there's still a little hint of that groove that I made. You know, there, that gave me nicer spirals around there. So we'll highlight that one and not make other spirals. And then the infamous chatter tool. Once again, the tool rest's got to be way back, because this needs to sit back here on this bar. And our speed's going to be higher, considerably higher. And if you have earbuds, if you're listening to this and you have earbuds in, turn your volume off, because this is very, very loud. Or can be very loud. And it just sort of makes basically makes little chatter marks in there. And I stop short of going off of the side so that we can try and do something a little differently out there. Once again, I'm going to highlight that one again. Just a little V groove in there. Bring our speed back down. And we'll see if I can do the spiraling. I'm going that way. And if I go, how did he do that? You can't do it that way. There's a way to do that. Maybe not with this particular one. So if we do it more straight up, it'll give us a little bit tighter of a spiral out there. And then once again, we'll color them up a little bit. So we used blue and red. And we have 3 in this one, so let's do purple, green, maybe orange. This is kind of the fun part of when I'll do this kind of stuff over at the farm show, is you can hand them markers to a kid and say, here, you pick the colors that you want. These got really a big fat point on them, so using the black one, I'll probably use my good one for that because it has a real fine point to it. So orange, green, and purple. So the chattering doesn't work as quite as well because it didn't. I guess maybe I didn't push hard enough on it. The chatter work is not quite that deep, so it doesn't necessarily show up as well. Because I want the white, sort of want the white background behind it, so that it makes it stand out. But it'll still, still sort of fascinates a kid. So that's really what it's all about. So we'll go back up to speed. Get rid of some material. We want this to be rounded over nice and neat. It should be rounded a little bit in both directions. Get rid of some more material. Back to my spindle gouge, it has a shorter handle on it. And that just gave it chatter marks on the bottom by virtue of it is too thin down there to do what I just did. Of course, there's nothing says, since we did do that, that we can't give it some sort of other little coloration on the bottom. And I'll see if I can color just the chatter, just the basically the chatter part. And that should be that. A little touch up on the point. Like I say, I'm rounding the point over is what I'm doing. So that gives us our pattern on the top. They sort of look better in person. I don't know, these markers are sort of filling in more of the texture than what I'm putting. A little too much pressure on it, I guess. But you can see the bottom as well. And it should spin okay. Could probably use a little bit bigger diameter. This started out like 1.75 inches, something like that. So you can make them any size you want, whatever material you wanted. You can practice on the last little bit too. Which could be the world's smallest handle for a top, I guess. That could also be the bottom of, if you were doing the bottom of the top of a top and you wanted to be fancy, it could be something like along those lines as well. So let's go back and spiral. Use the bigger. This one's actually a homemade one that I got from a guy down in North Carolina. It works okay, but that's not really the. This one has a lot more play side to side because of being homemade than what the manufactured one does. So if we wanted to, we could outline that a little bit. Could have been why that was jumping around a bit too. It was a little bit fast for it. So that gave us some nice small spirals in there to bigger spirals. I'll trim this edge up a little bit, give it a little color, and then we'll move on to something more important to be done than this. Just trying to clean up a little bit out that way. And then we'll give it some color. We'll drop our speed way down to do the coloring part. You're not quite that far down now. It's a bright pink, or a pink. Those markers are sort of wet enough that the texture is sort of filling it up a little bit. You could go a little bit faster on the speed so that it doesn't fill it in so much. There we go. That's more what I would be after, is I want to see all the white below it. That's kind of enough for doing things that we don't necessarily need to be doing. Like I said, I'll be doing that for several hours. So like I said, I have more important things to be doing than making tops. But I probably will work on some more of them throughout the week in the evenings, so that I have a bit of inventory, so to speak. So there again, there's our, get it in the right place. Hold still. That's the kind of thing that the texturing tools will do. Right now we actually need to work on our lanterns. I do have some of them that are ordered. And of course the lady that wants these wants the ones that are a little bit more complex to make. I'll put this piece of wood in here and we'll go back to overhead, because it doesn't make quite as much sense there as it would there, because there's where we're going to start. To rest just long enough, I guess. That'll work. This is ash. As you can see, it's got big grain in it, which is what we're after for what they want, because these will get dyed black and then the grain will get filled. At this point, all we're doing is making a cylinder. Be a little bit careful where these holes are drilled, because it cuts about 3 times faster in that area. And there's a lot less material to get rid of. You just want to get it to a cylinder. At least close to a cylinder. It doesn't need to be a perfect cylinder at this point. Not perfect. There's still little flat areas here and there. That's okay. Put a tenon on so I can grab it in the chuck. Knock the little sharp corner off. And I'm going to do another one. I have probably half a dozen of these sitting here. What I'm going to do. So instead of keep changing things back and forth, I'll just take and do 2 of them. Maybe all I do tonight is just the 2. Because it is New Year's, you know. So they corner to corner, just one of them simple plastic cornering tools. Punch the center. These I need to try and do some of this stuff as accurate as I possibly can. Because of these holes. These holes are laid out and drilled on a drill press. And they need to be pretty accurate. Otherwise, the little areas in between will end up being not what they should be. It shows very quickly on something like this if they're off too much. As always, we slowed the speed down to start. We'll bring it up to what I'm comfortable with. It's a very small, it's not a very big piece of wood, so it can spin pretty quick. Especially once I get the square corners off. Like I say, this is not real rocket science to do this part. None of it is, but we're putting our tenon back on. I'm gauging the size of the tenon by the live center. That's about 1.5 inches, 1 5/8, which is a decent sized tenon for this thing. It's going to be a little bit bigger than what it would actually have to be, but it'll work just fine. Once again, I'm not grabbing anything that's huge, and I'm not worried about it being a perfect circle because all that material up there will go away. So now we can go back to our chuck. Because the next order of business is drilling more holes. So that it does line up quite easily. I will bring a tailstock up for just a little bit of time here, because what I found, it's easier if I clean up this end now rather than after I drill holes. And I'm going to make it tapered inward a little bit. Also going to come back out here and just touch that edge so that it's not a razor blade. And also can get rid of the tailstock, because our first drill bit we're going to use is going to be a twist drill bit. And they don't necessarily find a point very well. So if I put a cone in there, then they'll do better. It will do better. Once again, I need somebody just to tell me to make sure I switch cameras around. So as you can see, I just made a little cone. I cut this off cleanly. It's still not quite round there, but that's okay. It doesn't need to be at this point. Now we're going to drill some holes. Our first drill bit's kind of a big, ugly drill bit. It does have markings on where I need to stop. And we're going to slow our speed way down. Like about 400 and it's like 450. Because we are drilling into end grain. We'll take our time. Won't come the whole way back out of the hole. Release the tailstock and bring it up a little bit more. And if I drill my holes, which it looks like I did, it's still going to leave a little bit in there. I'm going to go up to my mark, and then that's going to be it for that drill bit. And it left a tiny little bit, little sliver. This is when you get to find out, well, the drill bit not necessarily going to drill perfectly straight up in there either. Especially that drill bit. That's a public sale kind of fine drill bit that did manage to sharpen it. Either I sharpened it or my uncle was here, which is a machinist at one day. And said, here, can you sharpen these? And he worked on them. So the next hole is 1 3/8 inches, which is going to be a Forstner bit. So by getting rid of a lot of that material, this makes the Forstner bit not have to work so hard. We'll basically drill the same, we're drilling the same hole over again. And try not to have too terribly much extended on the quill of the live center, because that gives it a place to bounce up and down. It'll give me a cleaner hole in there. And now I'm looking through the side holes. I can see I'm going to go about half the depth of the Forstner bit up in there. Looks like I actually got a little better than halfway. That's okay. These have enough material, meat on them, that I don't need to worry about getting too carried away as far as how far up in there I go. It's when I go down to like these started out at 2 1/4 square. A lot of them that I do are either 2 inch. I've done a couple that were like 1 7/8 inches, something like that. Them you got to be a little bit more careful with, because the walls can get very thin very quickly. And it'll be right in this area here. I haven't broken any yet, which is kind of a plus. Kind of a miracle that I haven't. Now we're going to need one of the tea lights. These are battery operated tea lights. They have 2 different ones. Ones I'm going to use for her. These are the second ones that I bought. I should say my wife bought these. But the 1 3/8 is not big enough for them. But I know very good and well if I went to the next size up is 1 5/8, it would be entirely too big. So we have to open this hole up, which is kind of a challenge. I'm going to switch cutters. So I'm going to use a scraper, basically up in there. You could use a skew. Works better if it's a round skew, or at least a radiused edge on that top part. This is a scraper, a non-negative rake scraper. It is sharpened on the side, it's sharpened on the end. The end has a kind of a point here, and it's radiused across from that way. Even though in this case it really isn't going to affect me in any way, because it's going to be such a small area down in there that it's going to hit on. I'll bring our speed back up. Usually don't go real crazy with this, because these can be aggressive. I've done enough of these that I sort of know about how much I need to take off. Getting a little carried away there. But it doesn't really matter if it can be a pretty loose fit. And I'm trying to go in straight. And how I'm going in straight, I'm leaning over and I'm looking so that I'm sort of pushing the tool straight ahead. Once again, it's not, and if we didn't go in very straight. And these tea lights are anything but, these are actually, I think if you actually would put a square on there, they're sort of tapered a little bit. So that means we'll come back out here to this back edge. We'll take a little bit more out of it. Get our fit. It's plenty snug, but it's not quite deep enough. Those little points are still sticking out. And when I look down into the hole from the side, my opinion is I want that flame to be up there pretty close. So now I get to look in, and I can't look in and see this left side. I got to look over on the right side. So I'll get my scraper in there where it needs to be, get up to that edge, and then I'll go up a little bit higher and leave 1/8 or 3/16 of an inch, something like that, of a lip up there, or I should say below the edge of the drilled out holes. And that gives me almost, I could probably go just a little bit further. I'm going to, and make that just a little bit looser. I want something, a little bit of a place for the glue to go. I know what the problem is. My tool rest is not quite high enough. I need to be a little bit above center with this, so that the bottom edge of the scraper doesn't hit the bottom edge of the wood. As you can see the little dust on there, it shows you where it's cutting at, or where it did cut at. And it actually gives you a very, very clean hole in there. So that's plenty far up in, almost a full lantern. And now I got a nice looser fit, because I do glue these in with a little bit of 5-minute epoxy or some sort of a glue like that. And check our base and make sure that we're going to sit out here on the rim rather than in the center, which it is plenty. So that's probably really almost the most technical part of doing these. to get them to what I want. And then we'll go back to our live center. And did I put it away? Would be amazing if I did. I think I did. I have a cone. Okay. Question is, where did I put it? Look but no see. What happens when you clean up? You put things that aren't quite in the right place. I do have a second one, but that's not the one I'm looking for. These cones are made out of resin, Lumalite Clear Slow to be exact. They're threaded for the live center. And then they're turned so that they spin pretty true on there. And they're, I guess you want to call it, they're expendable. So that if I didn't cut this out here ahead of time, I could actually go back now and actually cut into that a little bit. And it just puts a little groove into it, which eventually you'd have to deal with. But this point right here, now I can finish making this round. And it's still supported between centers. So we'll get no vibration, none of that good stuff out of it. We just want it to be a nice sort of flat cylinder the whole way to the top, or the whole way up into here. Once again, there's more material that's going to get removed. So to be a little bit careful where you're touching things, you're touching a spinning piece of wood, and I just got to make sure that I don't touch it out here where them holes are. Not really, left a little hump right there. Doesn't look like I'm overly, that doesn't really make any difference. Doesn't look like I was overly flat. But I'm not necessarily super concerned about it being flat. It just needs to be round and cut pretty cleanly. So from there, I put beads on it. I cheat with my beads, and I don't necessarily consider this cheating. I view it as I have the tools to make this job easier. I have a beading tool. So I'm going to come down here on the bottom, it's the first bead, mark it. And the other one, the original ones that I saw done this way, left a small flat in there. And I just heard something. Oh, thank you for the follow. I don't think I'm gonna do. I do the triple beads. So I'll mark all three first, and then I'll go back. It is easier if I take a pencil and sort of go in the center or thereabouts where that bead's going to be. And then that doesn't need to be a dark line. Forgot I got a pencil holder now. I'm not hunting my pencils. So we're just wiggling the beading cutter back and forth until that line just disappears, and I'll lift the handle a little bit and it becomes a scraper. It is a scraper anyhow, basically, but as long as it's good hardwood and no really weird stuff in it, it does a really good job. There's little to no sanding involved when you're done. Making a little lantern. And I don't have a finished one down here to show you what it looks like. Stick around. It doesn't take very long to make these. That's one good thing about them. So from here, we've got about 1/4 of an inch to that hole, and I'll mark up here the 1/4 of an inch, and I'll put another bead above there, the same distance. And I didn't mark the center. I don't always mark the center. I should, because a lot of times you sort of waste a little bit of time. You can pretty much see it, but the day you think you see it right is the day you end up not paying attention and end up with a flat in between there. This is ash. This is some, I think they would consider this white ash. I'm from Pennsylvania, so this is some ash that's has been killed by the ash borer. So we'll bring this cylinder down a little bit, and I give them a little bit of a rounded shape. And as you can see, I will use a skew to do it. This gives me a cleaner cut. And I can go in that corner with the point, and it'll leave me a nice clean corner in there. And these starting out bigger. Oh, I know why. That's okay. I do have enough thickness. I forgot I was gonna. It's been a couple weeks probably since I made any of these. But I forgot one little step in here. The only problem with these resin. There we go. That has enough grip on there that it sort of sticks fast in there a little bit. And I forgot the problem with drilling the holes, and now we're sort of looking at it in the wrong direction. Let's go back overhead. And we'll bring it in a bit. Try not to make you too dizzy. But when I drill the holes, because these are drilled when it's square, it leaves a little bit of a dip in the inside. And now a lot of the people that I've seen make these, they didn't bother with that. But I didn't think myself, didn't think it looked right. So I do have a simple It's basically it. It's a hollowing tool. It's a negative rake. Feels like there's a little bit of a burr, not much of one. So rather than going back over and grinding, I'm just going to take my diamond hone and I'm going to go around that edge because I'm really only using this little point, curved point up here. So I'll make sure it has a little bit of a burr. Doesn't have to have a lot. Tailstock's got to go back pretty far. So I'm going to come in here and make this curve sort of to match this outside shape a little bit. You got to be very gentle because it will remove quite a bit of material quickly because there's not a lot of material there. So really what I'm after is basically like a little, you can't see it because I can never get the camera in the right place, but I'm trying to get rid of the remnants of where the drill bit intersected with each other. And I need to take a little bit more out. There's one there again. It goes. Each of these little steps, it shows you that maybe these holes are a tiny bit off, not enough out here to actually see it, but it shows up somewhere, and right in the inside is one of the places that it will show up. And basically what you see is the same thing I see because I'm leaning forward and looking down through the hole so that I can see what the cutter is doing. I think I'm going to, these are still fairly thick. I could take more off the outside too if I wanted to. Still not hitting that one very well. I'm going to take like one more little pass across there. And I'll take one more little look. Laundry's ready to switch. So that pretty much takes care of that. The other thing I need to do before I go any further than that too is sand some of these little burrs off of the inside. This is not a fancy kind of sanding job. Just to get rid of some of the little stuff in there. The other thing before I even go any further, the other thing I need to sand is inside each one of these little holes. And the reason I do that, I try and eliminate sharp edges. It's 320 grit sandpaper. And it's just a matter of running it back and forth just a little bit right on those intersections. We'll spin it around, we'll do all four of them. Because we're about ready actually to sand Actually, these I think I'm going to wait. I can still sand. It's easier to sand while I have good support on everything. And there really is kind of only one easy time to sand in there. So as to try and do that after the fact, it would be rather challenging. So that's all four of them sanded on the inside. The other thing I can do, put my drill away. Imagine that. I put it somewhere. It sat right in front of me and didn't see it. I drill 1 1/8 hole in these, and this is one of the bigger reasons is right here because I have a little teeny tiny little, I think they consider it a 1-inch drum that I got somewhere at some point in time. Because the Forstner bit doesn't necessarily leave us the world's most cleanly cut hole in there. And of course, the harder the wood, the better the hole it drills. So now we got that to that point. Before I start sanding, I gotta make one rather small cut. And that's gonna be up here above this bead. I'm just gonna give it a little chamfer down into the base of that bead. And then the rest of it you'll see what we'll do from there. Now we're going to sand. I'm going to bring the dust collection hood up and turn the dust collector on. And sandpaper is just like your cutting tools, it needs to be sharp, so at least the 220. It's the wonders of some of the things that I've done is everything's cut nice and clean. A slower speed down, sand across the end grain. I use the cut edge up against the beads. I'm not trying to put a ton of pressure on it because I don't want to stick it in between the holes. And we'll sand the flat area, or the flatter area. Go to 320. At 320, I'm going to start to round this edge a little bit here at the bottom. I'm not going to hit the beads at this point because they're cut clean enough that I'll touch them once I get to about either 400 or 600. Generally wait till I hit 600 because it really doesn't need to be. So now we're at 600. I'll go straight across the top of those beads a little bit. Light pressure, cut edge down in the groove, and just roll it just a little bit. That's really all it takes with them because they're, like I say, they're cut clean. There's nothing chewed up or torn up.
Last but not least will be 800. Take my paintbrush, clean off the dirt as best as I can. And I got to dress down. So I just knocked this off, knocked the edge of this off. I don't want them sharp, but I don't want a big round over on them either. So it's best done by hand. It's a piece of cloth back sandpaper. It does help if I break the glue bond a little bit so that it makes it rounder. I'll check them all before I move on. I think we got them. And get rid of the dust collection. Not that it hurts anything to have it up there. I'm going to get rid of our cone center. And put it away. Which we don't know what we did with the other one, but I will find it. It's liable to be laying down here. There's the way my lathe is set up to my right hand side, there's a pile of chips and whatnot end up down behind there. That's the one I want. From here we're going to put them on a jam chuck. We're still going to basically turn between centers. A little piece of paper towel if we need be. It actually feels like it's swelled up a little bit. I don't want to jam. I don't want to force that on. So I'm going to make just a tiny little bit of a cut. And it'll just be a little scraping cut. I use my skew to do it because it was in the very back of it, which is really where it'll break it at. And still a little on the tight side. That can be tapered a little bit. Okay, so now we've gotten it loose enough that it actually is loose, which is what I'd rather it be than otherwise. So now we can get a paper towel. Paper towels are 2-ply. So if we get our fat little fingers to get the 2 plies apart, like such. This one I already had used for the situation, so makes it a little easier. We put that over the end. Now that gave us a couple thousandths more holding power. Now that won't hold it by itself because we're going to bring our tailstock back up. We already have the center from before. So now we have that. We're going to add one extra little insurance thing because this all gets cut. Is we're going to use a piece of painter's tape. We'll see how this one works. This is from one of these junkier stores, so we'll see whether it's any good. It doesn't take a whole lot, but if I put the tape on in the direction the lathe is going to spin, then the little tail, if it flops loose, it doesn't unwind itself. That's just a little extra insurance. That's just going to keep it from being able, because eventually I'll pull the tailstock away, and that'll keep it from walking off. That's really all the tape is there for. So now we can do the top. So I'll go back to my bowl gouge. The bowl gouge makes it faster. That's really all that is to it. It's my kind of my go-to kind of tool. So we'll start making this a curve. This is the lid or this is the top that I like on them. You just have to be a little bit careful when we're gonna go off the end down there. So you're sort of cutting end grain into end grain down there. So it does have a tendency to want to kind of like break off a little bit. And I don't need to go the whole way to the live center either. And now we'll leave some meat down there so we can have a little bit of a ball on the end. And it looks like one more cut. And then just behind that sharp edge, that's like very smooth right there. And that will be our top. The rest of it I will do with the spindle gouge. So the spindle gouge will allow me to do a little bit more in a better of a little ball, so to speak. And now that we're in too close, there we go. Sorry about that. Once again, the spindle gouge, get rid of the chip that stuck right fast to it. Spindle gouge will cut it nice and clean. So we'll have very little sanding to do on that out there as well. We'll take it down to about 1/8 of an inch or less right there at this point. And come back in this way with the spindle gouge because I can get right up to that bead or that ball and give it just a tiny little, maybe a little flat on the bottom of it like that. And then we can go back once again and sand. Kind of the difference in these is they sort of have to be sanded in little stages because you can't necessarily get to the whole thing at one time. But we cut everything clean enough and all that good stuff, so I start with 220 because there shouldn't be any torn grain. I go underneath, use the cut edge, and get right up on the bottom of that ball. So then we'll just go through the grits. And I'm really only doing the half of the ball. I'll do the other half once I get rid of the last little bit up there and the tailstock, which is where that tape is going to come into play. So this is 400. I'm going to go down on that little V cut as well as a little bit up on that edge. I need 2 new pieces of fine sandpaper. Because I want my details to be crisp and clean, but I also don't want them to be able to cut your fingers. So it's kind of like a little bit of a fine line between the two. It's just what I've been taught from day one is, details are details. They're meant to be clean and crisp, but not so clean and crisp that they cut your fingers. Or could cut your fingers. So that was 600, go to 800. Certainly could have, should have probably checked before that point, but it's one of these things, when you do enough of some of this stuff, you have a tendency to, I don't know, be brave or have a good understanding of what things look like. Now we're going to get rid of, cut the rest of this top away. I'm going to pretty much leave it at sort of sanding speed. I'm going to get rid of some material up here, right at the tailstock, or the live center rather. And I'm not necessarily going to try and cut it off right at the base. I'd much rather cut it off a tiny bit above it. Right there, the tailstock's, yeah. Live center quit spinning, so you know you cut through. Now, there's 2 choices here. You can see, sort of see, it starts to wobble a little bit. So we can do a couple things. We can use some support of our fingers, and I can trim that last little bit off down there, which is kind of a brave move. If you don't feel comfortable with that, don't do it. But you can see our tape has held that on there quite nicely. Go back down and speed a little bit for sanding. I can support this with my left hand, and all I'm doing is putting pressure back in that direction. Because what this wants to do is walk off of there, which is what the tape is there for. So now I'm back to 220. Finished up the shape basically. And now we'll just go up through the grits and sand up basically to the center point of the little ball. In order to get the end, you can see I'm moving the sandpaper up and down, back and forth. That's the only way to get the very center of that ball down there to sand. You can actually sand it by hand without the machine running as well, which sometimes you need to. And that's pretty much it. That's the lantern basically complete. Now this one is going to get colored, and then the grain will be filled. The only problem with using the tape, you can see it wants to pull out, and it's mainly, for something like this, it's mainly dust. It could be pulling a little bit of, almost looks like it pulled a little bit of fibers out of it. Because there's certain places like right in there that the end grain or the side grain would be a little bit, could be a little bit brittle. Now, can I get this? No, we can leave it at that for the moment. Turn the dust collector off. I have 2 pair of gloves, yes. Put my gloves on because we're going to give it some color. We're going to give it some color, and the color is going to be black in this case, because I do want to do the grain fill on them. Oh. This is just a black dye. It's an alcohol-based dye. This particular one here I mix up myself. It's just trans tint dye and alcohol, denatured alcohol. It is a pretty concentrated black. So if I spin it super slow, slow as my lathe will go on that particular belt, it shouldn't walk off of there on me. I probably really wouldn't have to spin it. In fact, we won't, because it will come off. I know how this works. So we're just going to dye it black. And I'll go over it a couple times. Because what I should have done was actually could spray it with some denatured alcohol in order to get the alcohol or the dye to go in there. See if I can get it to cooperate and drop a drop. As you can see, gravity took over. It got that little groove, tiny little groove in the bottom, dyed black without too much effort. I probably could have made this a whole lot easier if I would. Well, I'm gonna make another jam chuck for this kind of process, I guess you call it, because I know the the 1 3/8 hole. I have part of it left here, and there's still part of it up there. So if I make a long jam chuck that can go from there to there, then I'll be able to use, because I want to be able to use the airbrush on this, because I want to be able to spray shellac, and the airbrush is how I do it. Just a sort of a cheap and easy way of spraying things on the lathe. I will do the inside of the openings as well. And then sort of trying not to be super messy, because I generally leave the inside natural. I'm thinking I probably should have taken the trouble to make that other jam chuck first. Because if I could make that other jam chuck, I could actually dye this with the airbrush too. I could just spray the dye. Would make it much easier. We'll just make a little mess right there. No big deal, because it's not really dropping onto the lathe bed. It's actually dropping into chips below there. Not that that's a great place for them to be, but so we'll go over it again. It's kind of the problem of sanding to the 800 grit like I did. You close the pores up of the wood, and now the first go around with the alcohol basically just opened the pores back up and didn't totally give me the total black that I wanted. Also, another way around that, I have some shellac that's black too. If it's not black enough, I can spray it with shellac, light coat, and make the black even blacker yet. But what I'm really after is I don't want any little white spots. Like I say, it is alcohol, so that paper towel gets unfolded, laid over top of the edge of the trash can. Oh shoot. I only did one of the... Didn't do all the openings while I was at it. Okay. So why you have gloves on too. This stuff will dye your hands just as quick as it dyes the wood. And it's very difficult. It actually has to wear off. You can get a lot of it back off with just some alcohol, but your hands and fingers and all that stuff has sort of like the pores, just like the wood does, so there's always a certain amount that will get down in there and won't necessarily come off very well. So that would be where we're at so far. I'll sit this off to the side and I'll let that dry for a little bit. There again, it is alcohol based, so it doesn't take very long to dry. Now if I was to use the dyes that I like to use are the chestnut spirit stains, which have a little bit of shellac in them. So the shellac will take longer to dry than what the alcohol part of it does. We got that cleaned up. Drop that clump of dyed chips and get them spread out. As you can see, I didn't get a whole lot on my gloves, but that amount on your fingers. For one, they say it's not really very healthy for you. And number two, it just doesn't come off very well. So that's number one done. Like I said, we're going to do, oh man, there you go. Hole in the glove. Never fails. So, a little spray bottle with some nitric alcohol in it. And we'll get some of it back off. As you can see, even putting alcohol back on it should reactivate it, but it doesn't totally get it off. And I got a black tip finger. So we're done with that little jam chuck. The back there. And we'll go to the second one. I need to chuck. That's right. I already put getting crazy here because we already did put 10 on the second one. So we'll grab it back in our chuck. Live center back up to make sure it's centered, which it should be if we cut things properly. Tighten it up. And then we'll come back down here to this end. We'll clean up this face. It'll make more sense if we go back over to there. See a little bit more what we're doing. This is not totally round even at that point, but that's okay. I'll just pick up my cut just behind the edge. Make a little tapered cut to the center. Or close to the center. And we'll get rid of our live center. Bring the tool rest around a little bit. Not a great idea to do it with the machine running, but something like this, it's a little less likely that you're going to cause yourself any aggravation. And I'll make a cone. And even leave a little extra dimple, little extra cone in the very center, so the drill bit has somewhere to go to. And we'll go back to our mystery. I think it's around 7/8 of an inch, something like that. I can bring that up and let it touch. Bring our speed down considerably. And then we'll drill a hole. As you can see, the drill bit bounces around a bit. It's certainly not any kind of machinist type drilling. But if I don't drill some of the center out with either this, or I have some other ones that are a little bit smaller than this one, then the Forstner bit, it has to work way too hard to drill all 1 3/8 of it out. So it just helps that along. It's a little bit better to do that than, heat up. Basically, you're going to heat up the Forstner bit because they will get hot quite quickly. A lot of friction in there. And as you see, my hand always remains on this drill chuck. Because when I go to back up a little bit, is when it can actually pull it free of the Morse taper. And if it would pull it free in there, it would stay in the spinning piece, and things could get rather interesting in a hurry, and interesting in a not so good way. You don't want the drill plus the chuck spinning around out here in no man's land. It would not be a very pleasant kind of a thing. So now we can go in here and we can verify first that we have, I mean, I might have a 32nd of an inch or something like that down here, but it's enough. It doesn't need to be a lot. It just needs to be able to sit out here on the outside edge. That way when the wood decides to move a little bit, it can and won't affect the piece from sitting. I am a little above center, which is where I want to be, because if I'm down dead center, the bottom of this can actually hit down below it. So if I'm a little above center, it always remains up on this cutting edge up here, if that makes sense. Because it doesn't even need to be ground back to side. At least according to Richard Raff, it doesn't. So we'll kind of sneak up on it. Not there. It's close, but not quite. Now that we know it's close, we can actually make it pretty much the full depth. That we want it to be. And then we'll just expand things out. Get it to fit. Like I say, these things are tapered, which kind of makes it a bit of a pain in some ways. You just don't want to be aggressive with them. That is for sure. The catch with a traditional scraper is very exciting. I'm almost tempted to turn this one into a negative rake rather than the traditional. But the traditional actually, from what I can see, or what I've played with, put it that way, will actually cut cleaner than a negative rake. And we could go up another 1/16 or more. But I don't want them little nubs to be sticking out of the bottom, because they have these little nubs. They probably stick out a 1/16 of an inch or more. So that's a nice loose fit. I shouldn't say loose. It's really not that overly loose, but it's a slide-in fit. It's not something that I have to push in. And when you look at it from the top, which you're looking at it from the end at this moment, but that way this, I'm going to call it the flame, is pretty much up into the bottom of this drilled out hole. So this time we'll do it the right way, and we'll go back overhead so you can see see the bit. Cutting on the inside. And this scraper here. The scraper I was just using, I was feeling it. There really isn't a burr on it. So this wants to be at center or a tiny bit above as well. And I'm going to cut downhill. Bigger diameter to smaller diameter, just like I would if I was doing spindle work. I don't want to go back up the hill. I want to come down the hill to the center. Down the hill to the center. Once I'm at center, I can blend them two together. And see what we got. See whether we have them all cut. It looks like I could go up on the upper side of it a little bit. Take a little bit more of that out. And also, I've played around a little bit with, because I have basically a cone up inside there from the twist bit and then a flat around it. But I do have some negative rake scrapers and whatnot. I could probably actually even do it with this one to get up in there and make that a little bit nicer looking than what it is. If it would try once. But the problem lies is the fact that I'm way over the tool rest. I got to be very careful on what I'm doing. And once again, I am looking through the holes to see what I'm doing. Didn't quite get all the center point out of it though. See, like I say, I can't. It's a situation where you really can't always see what you're doing. And if you notice, I didn't do that on the other one. Most of the time I don't, because I just don't feel that it's totally necessary. Any of the people that I've seen them do them on YouTube or anything like that, nobody bothers. They just drill the hole up there and call it good enough. So I'm being a little bit more, I don't know, fussy, particular. So now we'll go back to our cone center. And since I've already cut this, I can use the metal cone center that came with this live center. Because I don't need to cut anything down in there, so I can use the metal one. So now we can come back, because we still have a little flat there. Give everything a spin, make sure nothing's going to hit. That looks pretty flat. We want it to be a little flatter. We could always go back after it a little bit with our skew, which is what I think I had been doing with them, but not have it grab a hold of it. You probably should go the other way out here, because it felt like it, not the look, it felt like it actually took a, it did. Ash is one of them that if you do something stupid with it like I did right there, it will take a chunk out. So we'll go back over that, shrink the diameter a little bit, because I need to get below that. Feels like I did. Nope. Because that will show up in the bead. You don't want that. Teeny tiny little bit, but that should come out with the bead. Pretty sure. Bring our tool rest back down to where we need it for the beading tool, because the skew wants to cut up on at about 11 o'clock. So, well, I have to move the tool rest up and down with it, and you use the skew. Start with our end bead. See, the original one, I'm not going to do that. The original one has, and my dad made ones that had the flat in the middle. I'm just not totally sold on the flat part in the middle. For one, it's hard to cut it cleanly, so it just, to me, it gives it a little bit, makes them a little more difficult. So the wiggle back and forth, bring the handle up a little bit right as we get to the last little bit. Basically becomes almost like a little bit of a negative rake scraper at the very end. And our pencil mark goes away. That way we know we are round and all that good stuff. We did everything right. We're at about 1/4 of an inch, just like the last one was. So that's, I try and keep that part of it the same. So we'll just transfer our line around. And we'll put our one single bead up here again. And while I'm at it and not forget about it, we'll make our chamfer. Once again, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves because we didn't sand the inside, but that's that little bit we can do. We just want to make sure we do that before we get too carried away. But we can do all the sanding at one time because we have a good grip on things. And sanding wise, it doesn't take as much pressure. The bevel supported cut on a skew is not a big material removing cut, especially on something that's hard. So I really need to start closer to this edge out here and just keep working my way back. And I can go right smack down into that corner. Step back and make sure that I have an arc to it, which we do. And a nice clean cut. It is ash. It does. That's the part that I gotta watch is I don't want to take out. You don't want that to chip out. I left a little fuzzy right here. I just use the point, the long point, and go right in there along that. It kind of gave it a tiny little bit of a flat, but that's just better to have that tiny little flat than a little whizzer of wood sticking up there. So now we can go ahead and sand everything up to this point. Get rid of the tailstock. Then we'll bring up our dust collection. That's just 180 on the inside. I don't go any further back than that. Just interesting. Get rid of the fuzzies that are created from the drill bit, as well as a little bit at the end of where the scraper cut. We started with 220 just like the last one. And we just progress through the grits. Once we get to 600, then I will touch these beads. If I do them with anything, pretty much anything less than that, you start to give them a little bit of a distortion, and we don't really want to do that. Kind of defeats the purpose of having a nice, pretty much pristine cut bead. And you could do those beads if you were so minded and wanted to spend the extra, maybe the extra little bit of time or whatever. You could do them all with the spindle gouge. Like I said, I'm just kind of lazy when it comes to them, primarily because I have the tool. I have several of them actually, but this size right here, I think I'd have to look. I think it's a quarter inch bead. So that's the one I like to use. One downfall, some of this cloth back sandpaper. This is some, I don't know, mystery sandpaper that I got at my sandpaper supplier. The bargain box is what he called it. $3.20, It's a cloth back, but it is a bear to actually tear. Usually cloth back, as long as you go in the right direction, it will tear, but this stuff I almost have to cut. But it also makes it softer. You see that it's sort of conforming to the inside of this, where my normal sheet paper would probably maybe want to tear a little bit. Really just getting rid of fuzzies. That's the inside. I'll switch to 400. Sort of the same. It's the same type of sandpaper. This is a cloth back. I'm just kind of really sort of trying to use up some of this stuff. I curled it over the tool rest to make it curl, basically. I'm just knocking the sharp edge off. That's really all I'm doing. And I kind of forgot I didn't got ahead of myself. I wanted to do the insides of them first with a little thumb. There again, I don't sand that I'm not trying to sand it very hard because I'll lose my circle otherwise. And then I probably got to go back and touch these up a little bit. It's probably the most challenging part about these is actually to sand this little part of it right here. Even though it doesn't look like it, it's probably the most hardest part of the sanding there is on these. So now we can get our little jam chuck here. And the wonders of using the same setup all the time like that is this jam chuck is not going to go really sort of not going to go bad on me. I may, if I took too much off on the inside, it just means I might have to go to a full piece of paper towel rather than a half sheet of paper towel. Take another little piece of painter's tape. Wrap it around. And then we are back in business to do the top. And if you get too aggressive, like that, you can stop it. So it's hard to say what we just did with our tape. That's what I thought. It tore the tape. Well, let's put a new piece of tape on there. Because we were getting way too aggressive. Okay. More like an eighth of an inch cut rather than 3/8 of an inch cut. Does make things a little better. Especially when you get down to the end, because it will chip off the end, especially ash. Just kind of good practice to make basically a long cove. Really all I'm making. I don't want to shrink that down anymore up there. I want my curve to go in a little bit of a different path and lighten up as we go. Basically not take anything off up there. One more little cut. I don't try and pick up that cut. I don't pick up this cut down here. I don't try and pick that up right on the point either. I actually go behind that groove. I'm really liking mine. Should have left more material than what I did. And maybe we'll make it a little different one. And making the ball, we'll just sort of make it a little different. Since you got carried away. That's a big home. Actually going to cause me a little bit more sanding. I'm a little rambunctious there. Cut our speed in half or so. Still not a very big area to sand to start with, so I still started with 220. It's just going to take me a couple extra seconds or so there in that area where we kind of didn't do what I wanted it to do. A lot of these are made with like a, I don't know what you want to call it, but they put a, and that's the ones my dad made because he sort of watched the same guy that I did, but I didn't, and he puts the wire, takes a piece of copper wire and bends the loop to make it look like a traditional old time lantern. I made some of them. Some of them I drilled the hole and put a little screw eye up in there on the top of them to where you could hang them. I don't know that I'd want to hang them like on a Christmas tree or something like that because it's not, even though they're not really made, there's not a lot of wood there, but it's enough that it would, to me, would make a tree branch maybe not, maybe it would sag a little bit or whatever. Mine are pretty much designed to sit on a mantle or something along those lines. So that's up through 800. Go back down here to this end, and we will cut that off. Doesn't work as well cutting it off with that point sticking in there as what it did with the other point. So if I support it with my fingers. You can generally cut that cleanly off the end, even though my big hand's in the road of everything. Try and show you that at some other point in time where you can really see it. It would be kind of scary for a lot of people to hold on to the piece of wood and you use the tool with just one hand. But I'm up against my body. My arm's up against my body, so I'm using my whole body. I'm not just using my hand to make a cut like that. If I was so minded and didn't really want to get this to what I want or dyed and whatever, if I don't like this up here, I could still come back to this same setup and actually make this like a little tenon up here and put another little chunk of wood or something like that on there. Give it a little tailstock support, and I could return it. That's kind of the wonders of using like the jam chuck style things. It is very forgiving. If I had the right size jaws, which I do, I could use I'd have to put my pin jaws on here, but I could grab, yeah, there you go. I could grab this on the inside here on like pin jaws or something like that. But if I squeeze it too tight, if I put too much pressure on it, and especially if somewhere out here I would make a mistake and have a catch, then it's going to split this in half. Where the jam chuck is sort of less likely to do that. Not foolproof, but less likely. You could still split it in half, but not as quickly as you can with doing it other ways. Okay, so what I'm going to do is make a jam chuck, because I want one that goes the whole way up inside there. Not sure what I had this piece for originally, but it's going to be used for this purpose. So we'll just go about the middle, something like that. We'll have two chances to get it right, I guess you'd say. So that looks close to the middle. But went a little ways, open it up a little bit, a little bit more. Get it down to somewhere around about 1/8 of an inch. If I wanted to, I can release the tailstock. Can't cut it off with it on the tailstock or it would go flying. And I can come back in and I can cut it off. I could also just take in a saw and saw it off. Taking the saw and sawing it off would be the safer route, I guess you would say. I need a dust collector running. So we need our 1 3/8. I should have set these whenever. Should be able to set it off the drill bit, or that'll at least get me close. So if we take my calipers and we set it to our drill bit, and I'm going to set it slightly bigger because we can always take more off. We can't put wood back on. So we have to take off roughly about 1/16 of an inch or so. So we'll get our parting tool. Actually, don't mess up the lantern. Put it over there. We actually can bring our tailstock back up because otherwise we could get some vibration doing this far away from the chuck. So I might as well have good support. I could also use the skew. And just do a little peel and cut here. We'll put our calipers, let's make that a little wider right off the bat. So that goes over it. Let's make it a little wider because we know that should be bigger than what we need. Of course, here's the challenge of making a long hole, making sort of a long jam chuck. Doesn't quite fit, and it's also need to take some of that back right off the bat. And we'll give that a little taper out there. And that actually is getting really close to what I want it to be. If I bring that down, maybe not quite. And what I'm using is this corner of the skew and actually pushing it sideways. It's going to give me, it gives you a nice clean cut and also gives you a little bit better control. You're not quite, a little fat. And once again, this is sort of just like the one, this is really is like the other ones. I don't necessarily, okay. It can be loose because really all I want it to do is support this so that I can sort of spin the piece a little bit and spray the shellac and whatnot on it. But it needs to be long. It looks like that's probably gonna, looks like I'm sort of tapering up a little bit. Yeah. Still a little snug. This would be sort of like a low peeling cut. Not going to give me a real smooth cut. In this case, that's probably a sort of a benefit in some ways. Okay, so we're doing that. We're back down into here. But it's also giving me very good control over the amount of material that I'm removing. If I spin it by hand, I should be able to see there. I knew it should show me a burnishing mark. Might not quite show up real well on the camera, but I can see it, and it's right here. That's where we're getting a little tight. Whether that's tight because of something other than what I'm thinking. There we go. Okay. So that will work, I think. Of course, our next move is actually going to try it to see whether it's going to work. One other thing, two other things, I guess. One, we need this end to be straight, or at least relatively. Or curved in a little bit. Knock that corner off a little bit. Make this chamfered. Okay, so if I spin it at super slow speed, like that, then that should work. Now I can take and spray. I can spray the dye, I can spray the shellac without it really causing me any issues. At least that's the plan. We're going to find out here very directly whether the plan works. It should. I've done some of the same, very similar stuff before, so it should work. If it doesn't, I can always put a tiny little bit of masking tape or something like that, just to, like up in here somewhere, put it right on this end, so that as when I push that over that last little bit, it gives it a little bit harder, more resistance, or whatever you want to call it. Makes it tighter. Because I want total access to all these areas in here. Okay, the other thing that might work okay. So if I drop a little piece of paper towel, I can get it to cooperate and drop the whole way through there. And then push that up over it. Get rid of the paper towel. That now made it stiffer. I could probably do two, go one in each direction if it doesn't make it stiff enough. But I think that'll work. So you have to bear with me a minute because I got to get some things out. Got to get the airbrush, turn the compressor on. Anybody have any questions, comments?
kind of like some of my homemade setups that I have that I've made over the years. I don't know if I can widen this view out wide enough to actually show you this one. This is my workaround for a airbrush or something that requires less air pressure, which would be the airbrush, and I also have a little high-speed carver that's also air driven, which they require like 20 pounds of air or 25 pounds or something like that. I'll have to see what it actually is set at, but something considerably less air pressure wise, and it just makes it easier to have made this up to take care of the lesser air pressure, for one, and it also has a little air dryer or a dryer on it. So it just originally made it for the little grinder. It's simple, and it's pretty cheap. The only thing I haven't done yet is actually make a board or something to hold the stupid airbrush. Every time I use it, I say, I gotta drill a hole in, thick block of wood. Yeah, because this set at, 25 maybe? Could probably be even less than that. Gotta go the right way. There we go. 20 couples, something like that. Here's the time, though, that we can make a bit of a mess. So we are going to cover some things up. I'm going to get a fresh pair of gloves so I don't have any more black fingers. Because we're going to spray both in both accounts this time. We're going to spray the black dye on, and then we're going to spray the coat of shellac on the other one. Well, let's do them both, actually. Comes right down to it. But we'll start with the dye first. And you will see me pull up the dust collector hood, and I will turn the dust collector on when I'm ready to start spraying. That way I can pull any of the excess can be pulled away from me. And this does not go into my big dust collector. It actually goes into a cyclone separator, which sits right beside me. That's way more dye than what we need. Dyes are a messy thing to work with, I can tell you that much. Almost like no matter what you do with it, you eventually make a mess of some sort. Or at least I do. This is a very inexpensive airbrush. Yeah, I'm going the wrong way. Yeah, I was going the wrong way. This is like a $20 airbrush from Amazon, I think. You get the same one at Harbor Freight, actually. But we can spray a nice, as it spins, we can sort of spray a nice, really even coat of dye, especially on something like this that if you were here and watched the first one I did, it's kind of a bit of a challenge in some areas. Especially those places. Like I say, I need to do something to be able to put that airbrush in. I think it could be just as simple as a block of material, wood of some sort. Got to be about 2 inches thick or something, but something heavy enough so that I can support it, because otherwise the thing likes to fall over. I do put it down sort of in between the ways, and it does keep it pretty well corralled usually. So I'm just trying to wiping off the excess in areas. But as you can see, if you were here the whole time or you watched the beginning of this when I did the other one, that took about a quarter of the time to dye that as it did to do it by hand. Now just leave it sit there while I empty out my container, because I still haven't graduated to putting the dye in these little glass jars, and I really should, because I bought them. I bought glass jars when I bought the airbrush. I think I bought a dozen of them or 10 of them or something like that, figuring I could just put each color dye in one, and make a little label for the lid or whatever. But things don't always get done, and I should have, but we don't. Thought I had brought a bottle of alcohol over. So alcohol-based dye, very simple. Clean it with alcohol. What I've done is put just a little bit of alcohol on the bottom of that, and I'm really not totally concerned about at this point. I'm not worried about it really being clean, because I'm going to turn around and spray shellac, and I'm going to use the same airbrush to do it. Then I'll have to clean it a little bit. I will have to clean it better than what I do with the dye, but it's just a tiny little bit, and we could spray a little bit. Through the nozzle somewhere. Oh, there it is. Poor man's way of cleaning an airbrush. They make, if you go in the airbrush world, and one of the demonstrators that did a demonstration for our club showed us this little contraption that you can buy, so that when you put your whatever solvent you may use in the container to clean the airbrush, they have a thing and you stick the nozzle right into it. But even himself, he said, this is just a little, I think it was lemonade thing. I just cut a hole out in it so I can spray to my heart's content inside of that. And that's how I will clean the brush with the shellac. And I'm spraying the alcohol in there, and I just sit it over to the side and let it evaporate. I don't do anything scientific or fancy with it, because the alcohol, by tomorrow when I come back down, the alcohol will have all evaporated out of there. So it's It's really a simple way of containing what I needed to contain. Shellac I'm using is going to be a denatured, a dewaxed shellac. It really wouldn't matter that it's a dewaxed shellac. It just needs to be like I think they consider it a 1 pound cut, something like that. It's more of what it is it's Zinsser seal coat, which is a very thin shellac. I'm not going to start with this one, no. I want to get the one that I already did earlier. So I'll just sit that one over here. And I'll go back to this one. Oh, that one is longer. Oh, poo. So when I drilled a hole deeper, that's not going to do what... Well, let's go to the one we just did. Because we really don't have to. We really don't have to wait, so to speak. I think that'll stay on there. We're going to find out. Okay. Here's where I am going to turn on the dust collector, though. The shellac, when you're spraying the shellac, it will create a cloud. More so than the dye did. And what I'm doing is I'm sealing it, but I'm not trying to fill the grain. If that makes sense to you. It does look shiny, but as I spin this around, especially I'll come back in nice and close so you can really see. You can see the difference as I spin that around. The open pores of the grain are not really shiny. They're very dull, which is what I wanted. I'm going to seal the inside of these holes a little bit. And I'll let it spin. The shellac will only take a couple minutes to dry, or at least dry to the touch. So that's what I'll let it do is sort of dry to the touch, because I need to cut a little bit more of this jam chuck back further so that that one fits in it. Makes sense so far? If you've ever seen anybody do this, you can wipe. This is, to me, it's easier to spray a coat of whatever on it. It can be a coat of shellac. It could be a nice sanding sealer lacquer, or a light coat of lacquer, or a light coat of urethane. Whatever you can spray on lightly to not fill up the grain, fill up the pores in the open part of the grain, but seal the harder bits all around that. That's really what I'm after. And it'll make sense here in a little bit. So, are we tacky? No, not really. What I should have, be right back in a moment. I have some little drying racks that I made to do that kind of stuff. Very simply put, it's a piece of dowel rod that would stick up. It's just what the end of that looks like. If we go out, you can see there again, another homemade piece. I think if I remember correctly, I made this to do pepper mills, where I could slide them down over the nails, keep it up off of anything, and I could spray it with the big spray gun. I think is what I made these for. But it'll work just fine and dandy for this. I can just sit that on there because there's not really anything on the inside. And we can sit that one off to the side. And can remove a little bit more material back here. Because this back part really isn't doing anything for me anyhow. See if that's enough. Yeah. So that's good. I just want it back far enough so that I can spray in there and get the base covered as well. That is my plan. I do cover up the bed though. And if I needed to spray back in that direction, then I have somewhere around here, maybe threw it away. Take a piece of cardboard and I'll cut a little half circle so I can hold the piece of cardboard back here so that I'm not spraying whatever, shellac, dyes, anything like that back over into the chuck. Because if you do that, you spend another half an hour or whatever taking things apart and cleaning all that stuff up. And of course, as you can imagine, why I'm saying that is because I just got done doing that with this very chuck. We're going to do something a little different with that one. Because I do have some shellac that has black dye in it. Just sort of for this very purpose. Same shellac, a little bit of trans tint dye in it. Never really tried it, but I probably could do this in one step. Maybe. Let's come back in. Just like with spraying any kind of finishes or anything like that, I'm spraying a light coat, building it up. That really shows right there as to what I'm looking for is that open grain to still be open, basically. And I use a water-based lacquer if I'm going to spray finish on something. So this little $20 setup, $25 setup, will work to spray the top coat on this as well. If I was so minded and wanted to do it that way. And I probably will with these. These are actually easier to do this way. It'd just be a little bit more time consuming. It's a project that I would probably do more so during the week, where I could come down here when I come home from work and spray a coat of the lacquer on it. You know, maybe go eat dinner and come back a half an hour, 45 minutes later and spray the second coat on. These generally only take about 2 coats, and that's all I do with them. Because it's going to have 2 coats of shellac on it to start with. But it's going to have this initial coat of shellac. And then once I put the grain filler on it and let that set up for a while, some of that stuff actually should set up overnight before I go back after it. Just have to keep in mind the paper towels and whatnot that I'm using all get laid over the side of the trash can so they dry. Or put in some sort of fireproof container, I guess. I don't have such a thing, but they do make them. I just lay them out. Same way with my container. It has a fair amount in, but like I say, till tomorrow, that'll evaporate. Or I could take it out into my fire pit or something like that and dump it out. Because the alcohol does evaporate very quickly. But we need the biggest thing is we need a dark background for any of the grain fillers. You can use a lot of other colors. You can use pretty much any color of the rainbow, depending on what color grain filler you're going to put over top of it to try and enhance the appearance of what you got. The first one I'm going to use is going to be the green. This is the electric green from Hampshire Sheen. It is a wax, embellishing wax is what he calls it. I have other ones. I like the green one. I have pink, purple, and a blue in that. There's also, I could use this blue too. Well, I probably will on one of the other ones. This is the Chroma Guild. A little bit, the Gilder's cream, I think is what they call that. Is that what they call it? Chroma Guild. If you've ever seen Nick Agar do any of his demonstrations on some of that stuff, that's the product that he uses. He's somehow affiliated with Chromacraft. They used to make a accent paste, which is really nice stuff to work with. This is the only one that I ever bought. And I would have went back and bought many more colors of it, but they quit making it. This one works really well, and it's really brilliant blue color. Where the Hampshire Sheen, I like the green, but the other colors I can't say that I'd have to go run out and buy more of those colors. Because they're just not to me, they're not quite as vibrant as what they could be. That's what I was afraid of. My shellac is not drying for me tonight. So you'll have to come back another day. I hate to say it. That's the process so far. If I had... I could show you. Let me... I'll take this off, and I'll just set this over off to the side. Like I say, you get enough shellac on there like that, and it doesn't... Shellac takes about a half an hour to an hour to actually set up and dry, but it doesn't really get hard for almost 24 hours. That's also why I have like 4 of those. Yeah, I think I have 4 ash, and I actually have a piece of honey locust. Same thing. Needs to be, open grain wood for this process to work. So we'll do a fast track on one. I'll show you a couple different things. So there's our black dye. I look for pieces that have a lot of open grain to it. And this one certainly won't be overly pretty at this point because it wasn't sanded, so we're going to have some things that are not necessarily going to look the greatest. So it's basically the same process I just did on them. On Diet Black, we're just going to sort of fast track it a little bit on this. I can show you 2 different things. I can show you the reasoning behind the sealing of the grain. This will all get turned away, so it's not, I'm not wasting anything. So I'll take a tiny little bit of shellac, and I'll do one side with just a little bit of shellac. And I'll try and wipe it on just a little bit, and I'm going to almost like immediately wipe off the excess on that one, on that side. And of course, it's all alcohol-based material, so it starts to pull some of the color back off with it. So that's kind of another advantage of spraying a finish on there versus wiping it on. And if we don't seal it, and I'll flip this over since I don't have to flip it the whole way over, I can show you what this embellishing wax stuff does. Especially on the unsealed part. You get a little bit on a paper towel. You can use your fingers as well. But we're going to do circles, basically circles, and we're going to force it down into them open pores of the grain. And it will leave that behind in the open pores of the grain. We'll go multiple directions in a lot of ways to get it, to force it down in there as best as we can. And then we'll wipe off the excess. Sort of with the grain. And if we wipe too much of it off, we can always go back and put more on it. But you can see it's really quite dull and really doesn't pop out at you because it has sort of it's mixed with the black, so the black is no longer super black, if that makes sense. But if we go over here, even though the shellac is probably not totally cured, which we know it's not, if we sort of do the same thing with that one, and let it sit a little bit. There again, you can let this, when you're using these waxes and stuff like that, I've found that it's a good idea not to be in a giant size hurry to wipe off the excess, and let the wax start, because it has some sort of oil in it, I think. But you can see a difference. I'm sort of pushing it a little bit in both cases. If the shellac was drier, but you can see it made that one stands out much better than, if I can go up in here. You can see as I move it around, it reflects the light, versus the side that didn't have the shellac on is much duller, and it has colored the black in more so than the other side did. But what I will do with those lanterns, like I say, I'm going to let them dry overnight. I'll come back and I'll put well, they won't both get green. Though only one of them will get green and one of them will get another color. I'll put that wax stuff on and wipe off the excess, and I'll probably let it dry for a couple hours, and then I'll come back with my shellac, and I'll spray another coat of shellac over top of that to seal the wax in, because wax and finishes don't necessarily get along very well, but shellac sticks to pretty much everything. So I'll put a coat of shellac over top of that, or a sealer, some sort of sealer over top of that, and then spray the finish on top of that yet. And it'll come out, as I move it around in the light, you can see that it does reflect the light and really makes the grain stand out, which is what I'm after on these. Because the lady that I work with that I'm making these lanterns for, she already has one of them with the blue on it, and that's what she told me she wanted all four of hers to be, is the ones with the blue, or ones with the colors in. Really haven't. I know she liked the blue one because that's what she already had, but here's a different piece. Back up just a little bit. This has been done sort of the same way. This is also ash. The only difference is this has not been sanded and dyed. Well, it was sanded, and then I took a torch and burn it, and then use a brass wire brush and brush out the soft grain. So this has a texture to it. Same process. That once I do that, then I sprayed it with shellac over top of it. Left that dry, and I come back, and that is the Chromacraft blue grain filler. This one here is actually ready to get the coats of lacquer over top of that. I just haven't quite figured out, because this was actually done in a class with Jimmy Clues years ago. Although we didn't do the grain fill on the outside in his class. He just liked the texture of the black, the burnt black, because it is a texture. It is bumpy. But I decided that it was a class piece, so I really wasn't concerned about if I messed it up again. So what I did, and he uses what he calls dry wood, which he gets from Craft Supply, I think. This ash was not as dry as what it could be or should be, so it moved. This became out of round. The lid didn't fit no more. So I actually remounted it, put a new tenon on it, turned the outside back smooth, sanded it, burned it, did the wire brushing, sealed it with a coat of shellac, and then put the grain filler on. And this, I think, has the second coat of shellac over top of that. And like I say, it's ready to spray some finish over top of that. The inside of this one is actually done in a very similar manner. It's blue and silver on the inside, which is all about what the class that I did with him. That's one of the techniques that he likes to teach. It is kind of fun to take a torch to some of this stuff. That's all done outside though. I do not do any of that inside. Like I say, you let that sit. I could probably, if I would leave the shellac sit longer and dry, especially the sprayed on shellac, because it doesn't fill up the pores so much. When you wipe it on, I have more trouble with places that the grain filler doesn't necessarily want to go down in because the shellac has filled up the grain. And it doesn't work as well. It definitely doesn't work as well if you don't seal the surface, because it starts to color in the darker color, or whatever the darker color, in this case black. Even though the camera just kind of shows it as being a glump of green, but how about if I sit it down, and not to mention it's on green, that doesn't help. Wrong way. So if we go and nice and tight, it still doesn't necessarily show it as well. But if you were to let that dry and put another coat of shellac over it, it'll turn that black, darker black. That's it. That's the process. One of these Wednesday nights, I'm going to probably try and do that for the Wednesday night group that meets on Zoom on Wednesday nights. That's my plan. Otherwise, I think that's pretty much all I have tonight, this evening. It is New Year's, so we have to go watch some football or something. But at least I got 2 of my lanterns on their way. Anybody have any questions, comments? Ash is dusty too. Should run a dust collector the whole time. Yeah, the first one I did, it's not really overly sticky, but it still has a little bit of stick to it. And that's one of the things that I've learned, is to try and be a little bit more patient with some of that stuff. It just helps in the long run. Excuse me. So other than that, like I say, that's what I have for the show. I am normally here on Saturday evening rather than a Sunday. Thank you. Yes, any open grain wood, the more open the grain, the better. It won't do anything on any of the closed grain wood. So, ash, oak, honey locust, what else you say? Hickory. I don't do a whole lot with oak myself. Oak is kind of a tough one to keep from splitting and cracking and carrying on, but it will work on oak. Mainly red oak. Red oak has more of the open pores than white does usually. But yeah, it's a pretty simple it's a pretty simple process, I think. It's not necessarily a cheap process because all these stinking little containers of the embellishing wax and the creams and stuff like that, they're all close to $20 a pop. So it can be a little pricey. There is some recipes out there to make some, and I have tried it once. I still actually haven't tried it on a piece of wood. Yeah, but it doesn't. Yeah, it's another one of them scenarios of it looks really good to you and I because it's something different, but it doesn't necessarily sell really well. The blues are the color, for whatever reason, that the women, if you sell your stuff at craft shows or whatever, any of those kind of type events, the ladies seem to like blue. And I don't, it kind of surprises me. But there's a homemade one. It ain't going to work because it's already filled. That's yellow, because I'm from Pennsylvania, so I wanted a yellow one to do like a black and yellow, since a lot of people in my area would be, Steelers fans or something like that. Done some of the greens because of the Eagles, but like I say, the blue seems to be the color of choice of the ladies. Because there was one of the craft shows this fall I had a blue bowl and a blue. Yeah, I still have the red one. I have a bright red one because I like red myself. But yeah, I still have that one. But there was a blue one that was dyed blue. It had a little bit of curly. It was maple. It had some curl to it. I had that one, and I had one that was the black and the blue. Done this process on that, and she bought the blue one. I'm like, I got another one here that's blue too, and yep, I'll take them both. So I'm like, okay. And that's what somebody had told me, that there was a guy did a demonstration doing some of this stuff for our club, and that's what he told me. He said, you can make whatever color you want using the mica powder. He said, but I can tell you right now, he said, blue is the color. He said, that sells. He said, you can make all the red ones and the other colors. I mean, the purple ones I think look neat as well. And the pink. I have a bright pink. The bright pink one is actually, it's the same thing. It's Hampshire Sheen's embellishing wax. The pink one really stands out, but you really have to have, the wood has to be sealed very well, because the pink and the black make purple. So it's very difficult to get the bright pink. So I've found with it, but it's it's kind of an interesting process. The green does all right because it's, somebody can see that across the room as they're coming up to your booth or whatever. Something that catches their eye. I've done some of the ones with the iridescent paint, the Joe Sonia iridescent paints. That struck some guys' fancy this year too. I had one that I did that. It was a pretty good sized bowl, and I just did it. Most of that stuff anymore, when I do it, I only do the outside of the bowl. If I do it on a bowl, I'm only going to do the outside of it and leave the inside natural. That seems to, I don't know. It seems to attract people more, because if you do inside and out, I always leave something wood, whether it's just the base or the foot, because they'll always pick it up and turn it over and say, "Oh, it is wood," because they just assume it's not. They assume it's some sort of ceramic or something like that because of the coloring of it. But so I've sort of just do the outside and leave the inside natural. Right. Yeah. I mean, even though it really doesn't make any difference. I mean, it's dyed on the inside, and then that stuff all gets the 3408 on it. So, I mean, it's still usable. You're not gonna pull any of the dye back off because it's been sealed. So, so at any rate, I need to run. I thank you for participating, and we'll be back. We'll be back to normal schedule on Saturday evenings, usually I'm trying to get started around 5 o'clock Eastern time. But I appreciate you hanging out and chatting. And if you're watching on YouTube and you haven't subscribed, I would appreciate that as well. And yes, everybody have a happy new year and a safe night if you're going out for the evening. Be safe. Don't be drinking and driving. But until next time, y'all have a good night and a good week. And we will end that for YouTube. And now we can go over here.